as usual, because there are certain rules and regulations in the panel discussion. So, number one, no punching below the belt, if you understand what I mean. We will be discussing, I'll be initiating certain points for discussion, and we will give opportunity for each panelist to give their viewpoint from the perspective of their working environment. That will be maximum of 3 to 4 sentences. Then we will, from there we will take it forward on trying to understand subject-wise. Environment is a vast subject. If you're going to have a panel discussion, looking at the environment, I think so we have to sit through to dinner and even breakfast. So we are going to restrict ourselves mainly to water pollution, concerning a lot about our rivers, our streams, our water bodies. And we will also be touching a little bit on urbanization and the various environmental challenges we have on urbanization. So on that note, I welcome all the panelists here that amongst us, the audience. Please be attentive, because at the end of this, this panel discussion, we would love you to be enlightened that when you go out from here, and when people start raising concerns about environment, it should be effective concerns. Because a lot of us, we are so environmentally conscious, but then when we look at our own habits, it does not translate into the concern that you have. So whatever we discuss over here, whatever knowledge we gain from the panelists, it will be knowledge for you that you take back and then try to be that element of change for the general public, so that we will see a better state. Okay, so here we go. I will start with the regulatory authorities from the point of view of water. In fact, if you look at the genesis of the State Pollution Control Board, even of the Central Pollution Control Board, so Datta is here. We are both from the Pollution Control Board. It started after the Rio Conference. The first legislation that came out was the Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act. And under the provision of that particular act, the Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Board came into existence. In fact, that was the genesis. And it's only post the formation of the water boards, they were called Water Prevention and Control Boards at that point of time. Then when the air also was brought into the ambit of environmental legislation, then they realized that having a composite board to take care of air and water was put in place. That was the genesis. Okay, coming back to the point. Now, looking at the present situation, okay, I will start with, not because of order of rank, but because of order of the organization. The Ministry of Environment Forest is the top in the administrative chain of the environmental administration. Ma'am, Kong Sayo, we'd like to have your viewpoint on the present scenario, looking at the pollutant levels. We don't have much of industries over here which actually contribute into the water bodies, like chemical discharge. But then when you look at the BOD, the COD, turbidity, coliform, these are the parameters that are pretty alarming in water bodies, especially in areas where you have a lot of human habitation. A word from your side, what is the kind of measures, legislations that have been put in place to ensure that these are being kept in check?
Yes, even though I'm representing MOPCC, but where I'm standing, we are working in the regional office of the ministry located in Shillong. So as far as policies are concerned, most of them are being taken up at the central level. However, our mandate and the kind of work which we are mandated to carry out in the regional office is to conduct the post-EC monitoring of various projects, developmental projects, afforded environmental clearance by the ministry as well as by SIA. And I think Shantanu sir will be better equipped with all the rules and regulations when it comes to the water, where the water stands. But from this perspective, our regional officers have been conducting these inspections. Yes, you're saying there's not many industries, however, there are various mining projects. Okay, some are quite far, however, from the urban area. However, there are also some which are located very close. We have various stone quarries. We have various even limestone mining projects. And talking about the turbidity, siltation of these water bodies located adjacent or passing through, probably in around the mining areas, certain sets of environmental safeguards have been laid down in the environmental clearance when it has been granted to a concerned project proponent or a user agency. And where the water monitoring and preservation is concerned, as we are talking about the pollution in rivers, we have observed that 80 to 85% cases of these stone quarries and small limestone mining projects do not comply with the various environmental safeguards when it comes to the water monitoring and preservation. And most of them we have observed is that they are not aware or they are lacking the information on the technical know-how, how to comply with the implementation, and it's only when we visit those projects and discuss with the project proponents that they come to know this is what has to be done and this is how our project is affecting the environmental area around their project area.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Now we will be hearing from Dr. Shantanu the aspects of the standards that have been set. How does he view the present situation from the standards that have been set for these kind of pollutants that are there in our water bodies?
Good afternoon. Let's visualize the water pollution issues in Meghalaya. Say in Shillong, Brahmaputra River. It is only one region, there is no sewage treatment plant. So unless we have a sewage treatment plant, we cannot expect that we can restore the water quality in Brahmaputra River. This is an urbanized situation. And we are having for a sewage treatment plant, we are having the standard with the limit for the BOD, COD or TSS, like that. Now in the context of all northeastern states, see in Sikkim, from beginning they are having the sewage treatment plants. And like here in Brahmaputra, their Tista River is flowing along all the towns. You can say Rangpo, you can say Gangtok. But still water quality of Tista is much better. It is not categorized as a polluted river state. And reason is simple. Because they are having the solution. They have established the STP. And Sikkim was the first step. It is very common for all the urbanized towns and all. But for Brahmaputra, say Barnihat, we are having the Umtu River. Their pollution aspects, why Umtu River is polluted, that is, they are having separate reasons. But why Brahmaputra is polluted, that is for the sewage. And unless the government becomes very proactive, maybe we need, there's so many excuses, like we don't have space for construction of a STP. It happened. But what I feel, even it can be constructed at a bank or at the right, like a bridge, it can be constructed above the water channel itself. But we have the target. We have to set the target that STP is a must. Then when we talk about the pollution issues in, say, in Jayantia Hills, their issues are different. They are mostly arising out of the mining because acid mine drainages are drained out. And this is happening because of the very high sulfur content in the coal. Again, there is water pollution issues. You all remember that water became blue in Lukhar Lupa rivers. And we, both the State Pollution Control Board and CPCB, we had a fix how it is becoming blue. Because it is very easy to blame the cement industry or mining, that limestone industry. But it was really difficult to understand the situation, why it is happening. Because from a cement industry, there is no liquid discharge is not there. They don't generate any effluent because it is a dry process. But again, from limestone mining also, there is no direct generation of effluent. So what may be the reason? Then finally some study was there, and it was understood that high concentration of alumina was found in the water. You see the water blue, but when you take it in a glass, it is crystal clear. Because of deposition of some alumina oxides or this one in the bed, in the river bed, that with that reflection of the sunlight, so it was happening. It was appearing blue. Similar cases were happening in other areas in Assam, where in the upstream there was coal mining activities in the in Nagaland area. But again, we see, we cannot have any control over the alumina content in the natural formation. Recently I was there, another thing, that fluoride contamination was detected in all over Tawang districts of Arunachal Pradesh. So we went, we made a study, because the NGT took a case, and we made the study, and finally we did not detect. But I took help, CPCB took help of the laboratory of Meghalaya Pollution Control Board also for analysis of fluoride. It was not there, but it may happen. Fluoride concentration in many districts of Assam, it is there. Those are naturally occurring without any industrial activities or urbanized activities. So water may be polluted, but is there? We should have the control facilities also, control mechanism also, like STP, that all industries we can enforce effluent treatment plan. Today we discuss about zero liquid discharge. Recently I was there in a plan, that Arvind textile mill in Gandhinagar, Gujarat. It was even beyond our imagination also, that is, they generated about 9 MLD of effluent, and they are going to ZLD. That 9 MLD is even capacity of a STP here, small capacity STPs. In Tripura we are having STPs of 8 MLD capacity, in Sikkim we are having STP of 8 MLD capacity. Even Manipur also they have commissioned one STP. But in Assam and Meghalaya we don't have any STP. So that is why all river stations in Assam also polluted, highly polluted. We are having 44 polluted river stations in Assam.
Thank you, Shantanu. Now, we will get the State Pollution Control Board's perspective on the kind of interventions that have been there with regards to specifically the water quality of the water bodies that are there in the state. I request Member Secretary to kindly take that.
Thank you, Bhakran. So, I want to be specific, like always. See, there are 3 sources of river pollution or water pollution we are fighting in our state. When we look into the urban, is that the sewage, untreated sewage that has been discharged directly into the river. If I have to say the example of priority 1, river Wamkra and Umsherpi. So these are directly polluted by the untreated sewage that is reflected in our day-to-day monitoring activities, whereby the BOD, COD, and whatever parameters are linked to it, it has been proved. Then we go back to, if we go away from the city, we go into the mining area. Like we have the problem of AMD, acid mine discharge. And let me complete first with the first one, sewage treatment. What is the problem? The problem you have heard it is that we don't have a STP in place. Now what is the way forward? The way forward is government will find some other alternative solution, because we don't have STP like any other states in the country, because our topography, our land system, everything is different. So for different problems, you want different sets of solution. So we are here as a regulatory and monitoring body. So when it comes to how to go forward, we will not be much in a position. It's because we also have invited the stakeholder, the Urban Affairs Department. They would have been in a better position to elaborate on the thing. But sadly, they, due to some pre-engaged engagement, they are not able to be here. So that is the urban aspect of the water pollution. Now we go to the mines area. We have different mines. We have a limestone mines, we have border mines. But on a large extent, our rivers has been polluted by the AMD. They discharge from the coal mines, so to say illegal coal mines those days. So effort has been going on, whereby the efforts to plug all those illegal coal mines is going on. I think technical advisor is here, will be in a better position to elaborate on that, but I'm aware that the government is in the process of reclaiming the thing. And then thirdly, we have the pollution from the limestone, which is non-acidic. We have from the boulder, again not acidic, then turbidity. And thirdly, the most major thing which we have seen is the illegal dumping of construction and demolition waste directly into the river. So these all of these aspects have really contributed into the river pollution, where currently we have detected, without naming or believing anyone, take my point as a constructive. Recently we have detected in Umot River, we have detected in Nokrek River, and just yesterday we have received the complaint from the Deputy Commissioner of Riboy that somewhere in the construction of Western Bypass or so, some violations have happened, and we are deputing our team tomorrow. So these kind of things are not expected, because why I want to say that, I'll prove it at the end of the panel discussion on how working together can bring a better tomorrow. So let's watch for that. But before going to that, I would like to say one thing, like maybe sometimes out of, we are not aware or we have not been educated that to carry out this kind of a matter, you need this kind of a clearance from pollution board or so and so. Like if I go into the road projects, most of the road projects in Meghalaya, because they are existing roads, they involve widening expansion which does not cross 4 lane or 40 meters. So by far and large, most of the road projects, they don't really require environmental clearance. But it doesn't mean that you don't require consent to establish. Okay, you are under the regimes of consent, which is consent to establish and consent to operate. So in our point of view, not mine, in the board's point of view, if all of these mandates could have been followed at the beginning, then we would not be seeing all these results in the press, which is unwanted for both the parties. So, I mean, like the way forward is, we are not here to blame, we are here to support each other. We are open, we are free, and we are ever ready to guide and help the project proponents in every other project in the future. And then, as for the present, for whatever violation has been done, we are ready to cooperate, and I think when we work together, we have a better tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It is not by design, it's by default. In fact, I did not expect the sitting arrangement will be we're having the regulatory agencies to start, so they've gone on a very good defensive mode. Since, yes, we have heard that a majority of the rivers actually that have been affected is basically from turbidity. The chemical aspect is not too much of an extent, which means that the activities of livelihood that we are undergoing at present yes, we understand livelihood is a major criteria that needs to be addressed. But then at the same time, we also need to understand also the environmental impacts that are going to be there if measures are not being taken. We've heard from the Central Pollution Control Board that yes, in Sikkim there are certain interventions that they've done which has greatly helped in controlling the urban impact, urbanization impact on the water bodies. Yes, from the State Pollution Control Board as regulatory agency, our role is to do monitoring, submit reports for the government to act upon. I had wanted actually to touch on the Umkra and Umshirpi, but then since the Umngot River has been brought into the limelight at present, so I will switch over to that aspect. Yes, the Umngot River has been known to be one of the crystal clear water bodies of the state.
Our main concern is to get from point A to point B at the lowest possible cost at the shortest possible time. Finish. That's the end of the road. That's the end of the road. You do that, and you're a great man. Because what devastation you have caused along the way, nobody knows.
So the concern is the road, on road.
Yes, the concern is the road. That's all. Once you've achieved that objective, you go home. You're satisfied. You sleep peacefully. What has happened along the road is not your concern. So this is one of the aspects that we are now becoming sensitized to in the aspects of EAPs, that is externally aided projects like the World Bank projects, like Asian Development Bank and even JICA project, where we have the environmental impact assessment, the social impact assessment. You understand based on your environmental impact assessment, what are the mitigation measures that you need to put in so as to not damage the environment to such an extent, and you have to have an environmental management plan before you execute the work. So, but this is at a different level of execution on construction. So we have, like what I said, change. The only unchanging phenomenon in the state is we have a certain level of the contracting community that lives, that earns the daily bread from here. So at the same time, the level at which construction happens in an EAP is a totally different level, in the sense that of the understanding and how to go about mitigating impacts of social and environmental impacts. So this is
which means that from the Public Works Department, which is actually responsible for the roads, these things are being put in place. But then the onus of thing will be on the implementer.
Yes, actually, let me, if you are speaking specifically of Umngot River, I think this project has been handed over to NHIDCL. So this is basically, from beginning to end, the NHIDCL is the sole responsibility for all activities going on in that stretch of road belongs to NHIDCL. We have the state PWD is handed over that.
You did mention the EIA, the EMP. So I believe that prior to agreeing or prior to sanctioning of that project, so these EMPs and EIAs are in place?
No, this is for the externally aided projects, like the World Bank projects. Yes.
Fully external aided.
Yes, yes. See,
so that means there's a mechanism wherein there are checks and balances when it comes to execution of project from the environmental aspect.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
So that,
what is the difference then of this project of NHIDCL then?
So this is actually that you'll have to ask NHIDCL, because this is totally in their code.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Now, since we are still in this, I would request NHIDCL representative to kindly, I will not say clarify, but then let us try to understand your role in implementation of the project. And prior to implementation, what is the kind of documentation that you need to put in place in order for you to be able to actually roll out the project?
Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you, sir. Like the sir has said, that basically it is three-pronged strategy. One at the DPR preparation stage, other during construction stage, and one after construction stage, sir. So at the time of DPR preparation, normally we undertake this environment impact assessment and social impact assessment things, and basically various methods like whatever the ambient air quality at the before start of project, and what was the water quality, and basically hydrological mapping we do that during due to our construction activity. It should not like debris should go, debris or mud water should flow to river or any water stream. So these things are planned initially, sir. And
That is from the NHIDCL itself.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. And even during project implementation, we normally take care of this slope stability, and this based on the soil type and other things we
Okay.
normally carry out.
That we've understood.
Uh,
Okay, then, like what Chief Engineer of PUD had mentioned, external aided projects, they have all this in place. It's been scrutinized by the Public Works Department, and then based on the oh, no, I mean the external aided, other external projects is being scrutinized by the Public Works Department. But in case of NHIDCL, these EIAs, these EMPs that you prepare, who actually scrutinizes your projects and then finally say, okay, I mean, what you have proposed is okay, that you can go ahead? Who's the authority?
Actually, sir, authority is project sanctioning authority who approves the DPR, sir. Normally, these things are prepared by the DPR consultant, and it goes under scrutiny at various channels of government authority, sir. And finally, it is approved by highest level authority.
Okay, so that means this particular project that we're discussing right now, which has impacted Tungwan River, the authority is not from the state that approves.
Yes, sir.
It's from the center.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now we have Vanava, who is also a person actually where SEIA is under his custodian, and SEIA is authority that has been constituted under the EP Act for clearing projects which are within the state ambit. So, what from you, Vanava?
Thank you, Kharprang. A very good afternoon to all present here. So, Umgot has finally come into flow. Regarding Umgot, I think all of you who read Shillong Times, you can go through my article day before yesterday, where I have put into perspective. And I'll again say here that this NH40 expansion is a project funded by JICA. And I would differ with Mr. Shukla. No? You see, whenever JICA, before funding a project, JICA has their own ESC guidelines through which JICA does their own EIA, EMP, then your IPP, SIA, Social Impact Assessment, all this. Now, why in this particular project where Kharprang has asked a very pertinent question is, who monitors and how? Actually, what happens in the EIA notification, if you go through the circular of the ministry in 2013, 14th August, it says that projects which are above 1,000 meters in altitude, which is less than 100 kilometers in length, and the ROW or the expansion is 60 meters and more, then only your EIA is required. So you see, this brings us to a very pertinent issue. So that's why this particular project is less than 100 kilometers. It is around 85 kilometers. The altitude is less than 1,000 meters. and the expansion is about 25 meters, if I'm not wrong, because I was the advisor of JICA while formulating all these three parameters. Now it brings us to a very pertinent issue. I think all of you should give a thought to this, and I'm sure you'll agree that one shoe fits all policy has to be done away with Government of India.
This is where actually when we start implementing the projects and we start coming across these kind of hurdles, then that is where actually it should trigger the policy decision within the state to alert the central government that such kind of notifications pan-India may not be applicable actually in certain areas.
I'm coming to that. So as chairperson of SESC and SIA, this was flagged by us to the ministry that you need to have for the northeastern states, the hill areas, particularly the eastern Himalayas, all these parameters need to be brought down because our ecological status is much more fragile than the mainland India, particularly the eastern Himalayas. And this is still going on. In all meetings in the ministry I have highlighted, but somehow the ministry came up with some other modification in 2022, which was later, of course, shelved by the ministry, like your retrospective EIA, then you do some violations, you can continue, you can rectify, but there was a lot of hue and cry over the country. So this issue has definitely been flagged. And as far as Zumgot is concerned, all these parameters, EIA, SIA, EMP, and NHLDCL needs to maintain an EMP, and the monitoring agencies will be the same, which monitors other projects.
Okay, what about
Number 4, this environment, the forest clearance for this project has been obtained by NHIDCL in the 3rd and the 5th mile.
Okay, that is from the documentation point of view. What we can understand from what has been presented is that apparently it appears because of some loophole or some lacuna in the notification, NHIDCL has complied. They have the EIA, EMP in place, and they've gone ahead with the project. The state government has got not much of a role, except for ensuring that at least the convenience is there. But however, what is, again, in the end, who suffers over here? It is, as it appears now, the Umgat River, and subsequently affecting the livelihood of the people. Now, when we are going to look at catch the thief sort of thing, now NIGCL, the papers are in place. When we look at the state government also has got very minimal role. Then how do we go about in ensuring that in future such kind of things don't happen?
Now you see, first is the amendment, which may come, which may not come. But in this type of projects, it has to be ensured by the state government that the monitoring and the regulatory agencies,
Okay,
like the NSPC, CPCB and other.
I'll hold you there. Now, if such kind of projects, okay, I know they're very important for the state, because unless we improve the connectivity, the economy also is not going to come up. And looking at the kind of impetus that the Honorable Chief Minister has given to tourism, unless we have a very good connectivity network, tourists will not like to break their backs and sitting for 4 hours in the vehicle to reach a tourist spot. But then again, now what kind of intervention can the state bring about in spite of them not playing much of a major role? How do you see, or rather what kind of recommendation you can give so that the government can put checks and balances in such kind of projects which actually are exempted from the EC nomenclature, and like the role of the state pollution control, it should not be only when there's a problem, then suddenly we react, and then we go and monitor, and then in the end we just impose a fine. Imposing fines, okay, it's a penalty. But then what is the kind of loss of ecology, loss of livelihood? Now, who will actually bear that bill?
You see, number one, it is in this project, incorporate this particular project, where the NHIDCL also needs to have their in-house environmental engineers, environmental scientists and others who are to see this.
Okay.
Then there is specific, they are to interact with this State Pollution Control Board also. For the future which you asked, the State Pollution Control Board can be mandated for all such projects by the state government, that monitoring of the environment, it is not only environment, even SIA and IPP. IPP also is involved here, relocation of the people. So respective departments should monitor, and as far as the environment issues are concerned, the forest issues are looked after by the forest department. Environment issues, particularly air and water, can be entrusted and mandated to the State Pollution Control.
So which means, sir, from HNIGCL, you have your environmental team in place?
What sir has suggested, sir, we will definitely work on that. Besides
Okay.
that, sir, as such, there is no provision in the
I have set the tone, no hitting below the belt, so I'll stop there with that.
Sir, I'm
Okay.
just saying that we are taking sufficient steps for this slope stabilization thing, like we are implementing specialized methods like mechanically stabilized.
I understand that.
So here, see the complexity of the execution, sir. We have to encounter 50-50 height cutting, sir. So,
No, see, the operational part, implementation part, we will not discuss here, but then we are just trying to understand what are the drawbacks, what are the issues that we are having. Like, okay, now we understand the role of the state government, especially the public policy, is very limited. And then by virtue of the Ministry of Environment Forest notification, more or less you have been given a free hand. But then as NHIDCL, you encounter a lot of issues, no doubt. But then coming to the point that having an environmental setup within your system will actually go a long way in ensuring that in future such kind of calamities will not happen. Okay, so let's stop over there. Okay.
I'd just like to add to that, our answer. So the point is this, from NHIDCL side, like what Barnaba was saying today, he said that this falls under 1 kilometer and less than 60 meters, so the EIA was not was done away with. So everything actually in a construction project depends on the quality of your DPR. If your DPR is already flawed, then the whole construction process, no matter what you do at a later stage, really doesn't really matter, because the quality of the DPR itself is not up to the standard. So if a proper EIA was not carried out at that point in time, I'm not sure about this, but if that was not done, then I don't think so you can expect anything other than that.
Because without baseline data, then corrective measures also becomes an issue.
So sorry, I think we should pass on. Just one query. Like I have said in the beginning, I'm repeating it again. So we are least bothered whether it is through central government or state government. We are bothering about Section 25-26 of Water Act. That concern is applicable. That is all about.
For Ministry of Environment Forest, small clarification on that.
Yes, it's actually to add on various requirements of EIA and through EIA and SIA reports. Actually, in this regard, the highway road projects, which were once listed in the schedule of the EIA notification, has been exempted from environmental clearance. However, it comes subject to the implementation of specific environmental safeguards. And if you allow me, I would just like to read off two of them, where the implementing agency, it clearly states that they are directed to implement environmental safeguards under this SOP, the Standard Operating Procedure, and the exemption doesn't exempt them from approvals, from consents, from other permissions. To name a few of these safeguards, they have to prepare the risk assessment, landslide management plan, and a disaster management plan, then air pollution control, water management, soil conservation measures, and muck dumping plan, which is very important in case of construction activities, as well as avenue plantation, and lastly, monitoring mechanism has also been prescribed there. And green belt development, avenue plantation, it's also listed down here. And in the monitoring provisions, it clearly states that the concerned State Pollution Control Board is mandated to carry out periodic monitoring. So this SOP, for your information, Sir, Member Secretary, this SOP was issued by the Ministry by letter dated 6 February 2023. Yes. And the State Pollution Control Board needs to carry out periodic monitoring before, during, and after the construction to ensure that these environmental safeguards are properly implemented. And so, in a sense, besides implementation of user agency, effective monitoring mechanism is also important. We're not blaming anyone, and if it needs to be strengthened, it has to be strengthened in terms of increasing manpower and also using technology and other digital monitoring tools in these kinds of scenarios. So that's my submission.
Okay, two sentences.
With my experience, IDCL faced the similar situation in Arunachal. So there are two NDT cases are going on where they were fined more than 10 CR or so. Now, what suggestion is coming that the IDCL must be having the environmental monitoring group. That is a must. That should be there. And from the pollution control board, what problem I was also facing when I was in Assam, there are so many projects going on. We issued a consent because they are not coming under the purview of the EC, and we are not giving them consent. Consent to establish consent over, they also do not come forward, and board also not going to them. But we were issuing consent only to the contractors who are operating the hot mix plant or RMC plant. What we believe, what the member secretary sir has told, that IDCL must have come under the consent purview, and we should grant consent only to the main agency, not to the contractors. So then only the accountability will come, I think it can be enforced.
And the in-house environmental experts and others is there in the agreement very clearly formulated.
Yeah. Like ADB and all World Bank, they are having their own environmental team. They should also have, IDCL must have. That's a very good point.
Okay, from that issue on Umgat, I think so we can, the House, August House can agree that the government should look at having a core technical team at the time of clearing such projects or accepting such projects, so that we do not face this issue that we have had now, which has impacted not only the environment at large, but also the livelihoods of certain people who have been dependent on it for so many years. We will now switch over to something that is involves me and you. Okay. Urbanization and the urban problems that we have with regards to environmental pollution, but we will stick specifically only to the river pollution, because we cannot go beyond that. So I'm very happy to have amongst us two very young people. Of course, Nick is not too young, but then we still call him young because of his activeness. By the way, he sings also. Okay, so you can always sing the song Forever Young. Okay, Nick, with your experience that you've had, and then your walk on a daily basis with regards to environmental issues, we would like to hear from you. What is your view on the present scenario of the water bodies that are there, passing through the heart of Shillong city, and what has it evoked in you, the sense of understanding or the sense of fight that you are actually having right now?
Okay. Thank you so very much, Bhadra. It's a privilege to be amongst these August gathering and the panelists that are here. Before I answer your question, I hope we are all enlightened to understand that the failure is in the system. Let's not here point fingers. It's understood that the ball is being passed on from one court to the other, to the other, to the other. At the end of the day, it is those people living in Umgot right now who are facing the brunt of it. As a matter of fact, I was talking to one of my friends who's with the State Pollution Control Board. We should have had all the Rambashnams sit here amongst us so that they would actually understand this. I'm sure for many of you right now it's an eye-opener to see that what and what and what. Like, we have been having this impression, like, what? Seriously, the state government has no authority when something is being done in the state? We are having a 4-lane construction that's coming right up now in Ribhoi district. What about that? My God, I mean, this is something that has alarmed me personally, and now this is totally changing my dynamics of understanding the functionality of the state of ours. Sadly, nobody from the urban affairs is here. Sadly also, I don't see anybody from the government department, although Nava represents the government agency, but then, practically speaking, Prastone right now should have been sitting with us. Alright? That's not below the belt, I hope.
I'll need a sanction for that.
Alright. No, but frankly, isn't it? So that being said, as much as this fire has boiled out into such a volcanic eruption that has caused such a tremendous impact on the state, and the state has nothing to do with it. The governance has nothing to do with it. We are all blaming, okay, NHIDCL here is facing the brunt of it. But practically they also don't have the system in place. So the crux of the matter is that the failure is ultimately in the system.
Okay, we got your point.
Right.
Let's go to
Your
passion.
Coming to the passion. It is that very same river that I drowned for 3 minutes. Right now, if I step my foot there, I won't even find Dothri. So, the phase from 80s till now, what has happened is this bottleneck urbanization that we have done of the Wangkra, of the Umshilpi, under whose authority? Who are the ones who have given all those permissions without aligning the course of the river? Let's not name few structures that are there. If I name them, then again that would be not just below the belt, it'll just be a hook, knockout hook. Because we have the who's who have built the mega structures all around us. We don't need to even go down to tell which company it is. But come to the core of it. That is the reason. Failure of governance in terms of our district council, who are the heads of the local governance. Failure also in the state government authorities, who, because of the jurisdictional conflict, have not been able to streamline, which has led to everything going haywire. The disposal of waste, which is happening right from Madanrati all the way down to Maudu, is a failure of governance. Is a failure of governance at different level. And jurisdictional issues. The KHDC has got nothing to do to partake with the district, with the MUDA when it comes to keeping a check on it. So, practically, if you look at it now, as much as we blame the citizens, in this process of me trying to understand the whole problem that Wangkra is facing, now with the various interventions being taken, the ETP, why this has become a failure? As a matter of fact, we were updated that there are around 5 ETPs and the inflow Nala project, etc., etc. I did meet the gentleman who was involved with it, who was from Haryana, if I'm not wrong. The gentleman, I asked him, Bhai Sahab, this is a hilly terrain. How on earth do you think these ETPs of yours are going to be functioning? And guess what? One hell of a rainfall and everything is gone. And now what we see is just the skeletal part of it. So which means to say that there has been a massive failure when it comes to the present scenario that we are facing, and it's going to be the worst case scenario.
Yes, that aspect we are aware, but then we want actually to be motivated by the passion that we have.
All right.
We would like to hear what drives you.
What drives me? What do we have then? What do we have? I mean, what I'm going to leave behind the legacy to your grandchildren.
So basically,
My maker used to take us to the river Omkra to wash, to clean, to do everything. Now, we don't even talk about the river. And it's been now put under a cage all around the city.
Yes.
Under a cage.
We noticed that.
So if you talk about my passion, all I'm going to say is this. This is my Meghalaya. This is my pride. If I not, then who?
Okay.
Thank you.
Vanik has struck a very, very emotional and very personal note that unless you take a sense of ownership or the sense of belonging, then whatever intervention that you put in place is not going to work. Okay. So, taking the view beyond the urbanization of Shillong, we have over here from Green Tech. In fact,
just something to add. Just to cool down the tempo here, for the fact that we are talking Umgat, let me give you the latest update. I've just received a video right about now from the boatsmen out there. All is well. And they are praying that in the next 3 days, all is going to be well. The video is already there on my Instagram handle. We have collaborated. Have a look at it. And they have been pleading now to the tourists that stop shaming Meghalaya by saying that this river is not going to be recovering. It is in the process. So, bhai sahab, aap bach gaye ho. Filhal ke liye. So, that's the latest update.
But then I think so that's like putting in ICU. I think so we need to do a long-term plan. Okay. In fact, I was personally actually associated with Green Tech and understanding what they're doing. So we would like to hear from them their perspective of the water quality in the non-urbanized areas. However, though urbanization has not been taking place, but a lot of inhabitants actually are coming towards areas where you have easy accessible to the market, easy accessible to transport. We would like to hear from you, Ba. What are the challenges that you face vis-a-vis the water bodies around those areas?
We are Green Tech Foundation. Our work here in Meghalaya is purely for environmental conservation and preservation. We are a body, a group of youngsters who work very deep-rooted with communities. So we work very closely with communities, local traditional institutions, social groups, and different organizations at grassroots levels. So what we have identified with regards to river pollution especially, we have only 3 pointers. Number 1 is pollution by human activity. Number 2 is the non-adherence of environmental laws by the factories and industries. And then the third pointer is that there is no proper procedure whenever there is implementation of projects. We've had a long discussion just now about NHIDCL and everything. We have also started river cleanup projects almost in every district right now, except Garo Hills. We have touched Omyam, we have touched Waumka, we have touched Nonten, Nanba, we have touched Mintru also, we have touched Kukli also. Now I would just want to throw an aspect out here that Waumka has a BOD of 30. That is in Shillong City. And we find the major contributors out there is this, as I said, untreated sewage that comes out from households, and also human waste, human activities of discarding waste. One issue I'm going to tell you about untreated sewage from households. There was an instance that we held a cleaning drive with the State Pollution Control Board back in, I think, last 2 years, where Sir Vedyanathan was there, presently Sir. And in one of our river cleanup projects out there in Laban, we found out one house belonging to one public department, which was without toilet.
Okay, I'll stop you there.
Yes.
Now, is it the government's responsibility to ensure that you have a toilet, or is it the responsibility of the individual household? This is a question that's very pertinent. When we look at environmental issues, we always like to see from the perspective of the government providing everything. But in the end, if you look at environmental issues, especially when we look at urbanization, it is not the government who urbanizes a particular area. It is actually the inhabitants, that means me and you, who go and actually urbanize a particular area. And if we do not have that sense of responsibility of ensuring that at least we meet the basic norms. I mean, you don't have to have a ETP or you have to have a electrostatic precipitator in your house to clean the air and to clean the water, but basic thing like a septic tank, which takes care of your black water, right? So this is the issue. But then coming again to the point that we would like to hear more from the rural area. I mean, the challenges and what are the kind of issues that you have encountered, which has actually now being the reason for contributing into the deteriorating condition of the water bodies over there.
So, with regards to rural areas, we have always advocated for, even in local traditional institutions like the Darbar Shnams, it is high time right now that we have environmental committees within the Shnams. This will help not only in monitoring the environmental quality of the village, but also to bring coordination with the authorities. I'll give you, because we are talking so much about this road construction, I just want to pinpoint one more thing. Because it has recently just touched, I got the news before coming here, that the ongoing construction of this certain road, I need not to mention, has now polluted one of the rivers out there in Laosotun, right now. There are certain deposits out there. So now, just to pinpoint that out, so people in villages, they are deep-rooted with traditional systems. We need not to tell them, you do this, you do that, you do that, you do this. We need not to tell them. It's just that they have a difficulty in bridging the gap with the authorities whenever projects come, whenever there's a development that comes into their villages, and whenever there's anything that has been initiated to uplift their communities. But then this comes at the cost of rivers, this comes at the cost of unhygienic conditions of the villages, and tourism also is another factor. But then what we suggest is that formation of environmental committees within the Darbar systems will enhance this and will protect much more against the polluters. Because this will make them understand, like Panik just said, right now we should have had Darbars of Rambashtans here, and entire Sanjuk should be here, so that they understand. So even in one of our project cleanups out there in Nonba, which is in Nongstoy, West Khasi Hills, the major contributor out there, we can say it comes from the markets, the households, and the BOD out there of Wananba, we found it to be around 8 to 9.
So what we can understand from you is not propounded as in Shillong city, the urbanization, but then the factors that are contributing to the deteriorating water quality in rivers is almost similar because of, so now we, more or less we have come to understanding that when it comes to construction activities, yes, we understand there are a lot of gaps that are there that needs to be plugged. But then when it comes to the urban pollution that is being created, in the end, I think so we need to relook at ourselves, our habits, our lifestyles, are we in tune or not with the government. In fact, it's very interesting.
But let me add to the aspect where we are talking about rural areas facing the, see, if you look at 20 years from now, the rural lifestyle was not the way we urban people live. The consumption of plastic waste, especially all the MLPs, was non-existent. Now, every village is using diapers. Every village is using MLPs. So if you go to a riverside right now, a ghat, or rather I would say Chakasakya, you would notice that it is the inability of the people to actually handle that single-use plastic waste which is already causing major concern. Divers being dumped right on the riverbed. So what's happening here is there is a tremendous impact that has caused into the lifestyle change of the rural mindset as well. And they have absolutely no how, because why? Firstly, they don't have a land grid. Secondly, the environmental or the health sanitation committees that they have there. It's not about just putting a basket somewhere. It's about also maintaining it and finding a solution. Say, for example, let's talk about this. So this river which goes via Nongkrem. So there are cars being washed. There are people who are washing clothes.
And discharge.
And the discharge. And that eventually is ending up at Nongkrem. So when we are speaking to the people, they said that we burn the single-use plastic waste. Even let's talk about Mollonong. Where does Mollonong dump its waste?
Hello. I must really congratulate the State Pollution Control Board for such enriching talk. Though it was like, it is not about who wins or what. We have to come out with the problems head on. Then only we will be able to address. So it was really enriching. I'm Anupi James, I'm from the Forest Department. And regarding the river pollutions, when we think of everything holistically, again, afforestation, the forest conservation, catchment area protection, quarrying, mining, they are eroding the soils, and as Banik told, we are all stakeholders have to be there, and I 100% agree that the village heads, they have to be here. So it is about a coordinated approach, and maybe since you are the near community representatives, the ones on my right, this is very important to have this as Green Tech, you have already pointed out, environmental committees within the darbars. This may be the way forward, because even in a rural village, when you go, there are plastics. Vehicles are being washed there. We can see darbars also. This is very right. So we might encourage that, and maybe the government can set up a seed money, and things will get rolling. Once it should be self-sustainable also, even pollution, the waste collection also. I come from state of Kerala, but as Barbik told, I'm an Indian Forest Service officer. I am passionate because I love Meghalaya. It's my state now. So I think in Kerala we have a model of Kudumbashree, wherein the local self-government, the villagers, the ladies, they only collect all this garbage. They segregate at the source. And now the Shillong Municipal Board, though we segregate, we dump it into the same. So the whole purpose is gone. So I think we should take, it is no more, it is a high time. We don't have time, we are working against the time. So we must activate. It's not about together we can take the lead, and we have to keep things moving. I think you will take a lead, and everything once the universe will conspire also to make our state of Meghalaya clean, beautiful, and control the pollution. Whatever in the development process we have pollution, but we should be able to deal with it so that we have the responsibility towards the future generations. Thank you.
Can I add to that, Sakarka? Yes, you rightly point out that like we suggested for an environment committee, but I hope from the foundation we would like to suggest is that even if we have an environment committee, now this environmental committee will be giving duties to their own local youths out there to collect garbage, but there's no place to dump, right? So that's another, yes, for disposal, there's no place to dump. So we would suggest, let this message also go out of this room, that why not the government initiate some eco-friendly startups, specifically direct specific funds incentives for eco-startups, because we don't have any place to recycle out here. We have no place. If we're going to collect in heaps and heaps, it's going to pile up, but we have no recycling unit, no recycling centers, we don't have the machinery, we're not equipped with such infrastructure out here. So why not the government designate a small incentive towards eco-friendly startup? Otherwise, we'll just end up going to Guwahati. Everything going to Guwahati. So maybe let that message go out of this room.
Thank you, ma'am, for that, I should say, very passionate address just now. If you from Kerala, working 9 years in Shillong, can confidently say, look, Meghalaya is mine now. How much more for the people actually who are born and brought up over here? I think so. It's a very, very strong message here sent, and I hope that it will resonate into your minds and your hearts, so that you will understand that the preciousness of our state and the uniqueness of our state, so that we can attract more people as they come to Shillong, and then improve the image of the state. Just one more either view or question, please.
Shortage of recycler in the Meghalaya. You have the plenty of the cement plant in the Meghalaya, and these are the big inserter. You can give your municipal waste to the cement plant, and I request for Shilka Tool Board, they should play the role of arbitrator between municipal corporation and cement plant, so that most of the municipal waste can be consumed in the cement plant. And second thing, this construction and demolition waste that can be used in the making of paver blocks, so we can promote the paver block industry.
Thank you very much. I will not say much, but then I think so we need to sit across the table with Dalmia Cements and really work on this co-processing of waste, and so that the benefits also can be translated into the local bodies who are actually actively trying to put a system in place. I think so we, in winding up, we have been enlightened. We have, like what Banik has said, a lot of us actually must be saying, what, I mean, this is the facts that have been presented to us, actually very hard facts. In fact, I don't know how many of you attended the Lit Fest that was being held at Wards Lake. In fact, on day 3, Honorable Chief Minister gave a very impressive speech. He reached that function a little bit early, but then his address went on. And as he was speaking, and at the point of time when he was actually emphasizing on the beauty of the lake and the beauty of Shillong and the beauty of the state, in fact, the ground shook. And there was an earthquake, actually. And the CM said that, I think so, I spoke too loud. But then we should actually, that should be an awakening for us. Many a times we express only through our words regarding the environmental issues or the concern for environment. But then we are not willing to link what we speak into what we do. I think so we need to look at that. And once we are in tune on what we say and are concerned for the environment, and then what we do, I think so a lot of these issues that we are discussing right now will actually be just history. Okay, we will be seeing a better, a brighter locality that you stay, a better, brighter city, and a better and brighter state. In fact, if you look at Dr. Ambedkar and his team who had enshrined the Constitution for us, the Directive Principles does state that it shall be the state's endeavor to ensure that environment is being protective, wildlife is being protective. But then if you look at the duties that has been again enshrined in the Constitution, it is the duty of every citizen of India to ensure that we protect the environment, the ecology and wildlife. And on that note, I think so, since we call ourselves Indian and we swear by the Constitution, let us be true to it. Let us take upon ourselves that my action and my sense of responsibility should be more towards the environment, so that we leave a legacy behind for our future generation. It's no point that we try to accumulate as much as possible what we can see now, and then we forget our future generation what is left for them. Thank you very much to the esteemed panelists. It's been very interesting. They deserve a big hand, please.